So due to this notable delay in a portion of the ESEA funding, we have determined that the new deadline for the FY26 ESEA Consolidated Application has been extended to September 1st, 2020. So what that will mean is that right now you may be in a situation where you have an application that is in some status, but again, that application will be reviewed and returned to you according to the guidance that we will share with you momentarily. So all SAU allocations for these programs have been uploaded into your FY26 ESEA consolidation. They are also available online in the final allocations within the allocation section of our ESEA website. And with the release of these funds, there are some notable changes that we will walk through with you folks today. However, we did provide all of that information last week to your superintendents, ESEA coordinators, and business managers. Also, if you're looking sort of for that documentation in regards to the steps that we will highlight in today's office hour, but were also highlighted in that email from last Wednesday, it is included in the FY26 application history log. So as it relates to substantial approval dates for FAUs who have already submitted applications and received substantial approval for Title I and Title V, that information will be included in your history log, and the substantial approval date would revert back to when the LEA authorized rep approved that application, and that application for Titles I and V were submitted in an substantially approvable form. So FAUs can begin to obligate expenses under Titles I and V with those substantial approval dates once you receive that information. There's a number of folks that had an LEA authorized rep approved application, and our team is reviewing those and returning as applicable. Now that we have Titles II, III, and IV, our next goal is to kind of obtain substantial approval for you folks and review your applications with a lens on 2, 3, and 4. Some SAUs have determined that they want to reopen their application before even any review has been conducted to be able to finalize all of the titles, but that is essentially a choice the LEA can make. And then the other thing to be aware of is if the application continues to need revisions for Title II, III, and IV, that substantial approval date may differ from Titles I and V. So again, one thing that we're drawing your attention to is FAUs who have Title II, III, and IV costs prior to September 1st, which is the new extended deadline for FY26 ESEA Consolidated Application, are encouraged to request pre-award costs. And we will go into that information again related to pre-award costs, because this is one of the notable changes that is described in the email, in the history log, and in our office hour today.
All right, good morning, folks. Speaking about pre-award costs, we're strongly recommending that any SAU that is looking for pre-award costs, make sure you do so if it's needed for this year. Like Shelley said, we're extending the deadline for the application. So pre-award costs for all titles is eligible as long as the application has been submitted by 9/1. With the approval of pre-award costs, again, like Shelley had mentioned, it's going to date back to July 1st. So any expenses from July 1st through the date of substantial approval, they will be able to cover. And this is definitely going to be helpful for districts who have very little or no carryover funds from prior fiscal years. As far as pre-award costs go, please remember that the request must be specific in nature, as well as being reasonable, allocable, and necessary. You can't just put that you want, your entire Title I allotment for the month of September. Usually it's a very specific piece that people are asking for, whether it's like summer programming and it's a specific amount. So try to be as specific as possible with your pre-award cost request. And again, applications that are submitted by 9/1 are eligible for pre-award costs for all titles. And then we just wanted to remind folks that for the application, a couple things that you're going to want to make sure that you go in and double check. Your ESEA program assurances, make sure you update titles 2, 3, and 4 as applicable. And then make sure for your non-public school consultation, if you have a non-public, that the participation forms must be updated to include titles 2, 3, and 4. And then they must be recertified and re-signed by the non-public school official.
Good morning. Yes, so continuing on with sort of application changes and updates to consider, good problem to have. Now you have more allocations on the allocations page that need to be allocated. Remember, really important to remember that for folks with Title III and Title IV, they need to be put into categories. Title IV has the well-rounded, safe, healthy, effective use of technology, and Title III has that instruction and family engagement. And so it's very important that those are actually allocated on the page before you see it on the Create School and District Project page. So if you're not seeing allocations populating on that page, it's probably because you haven't done that first step on the allocations page. Note that for those folks or SAUs that are used to or often transferred to Title I Part A, understand that those funds become Title I Part A funds, and you'll need to meet those statutory requirements. So that means excess carryover by the performance report time. If you have more Title I dollars, you have to spend them down the year they're awarded. If you're transferring into Title I, triggers over that you're over 500,000 in Title I, that triggers the family engagement reservation set aside requirement for 1%. For folks with school-wide programs, I've had a couple conversations lately. You should understand the difference between transferring and consolidating. So knowing your flexibilities with school-wide, that if you maintain Title II or Title IV dollars in your school-wide, they just become school-wide funds and can still be spent, for example, on salaries and benefits for interventionists. These are the kinds of things that your SAU should feel comfortable understanding, talking through, and knowing your best options for your business office and for your programs. In addition, note that for alternative use, any SAU that's eligible for that page, so you go under the allocation sections of your application. If you're eligible, this is another provision that enables flexibilities to use Title II or Title IV funds as if they were another title. So another way, for instance, if you're paying salaries and benefits for interventionists, to use the alternative use provision, and that's in the application as well. You must ensure, right? The big error that it doesn't want to see in your application is unallocated funds. You want to make sure they get into those schools and those district projects. For folks adding Title II and Title IV projects to schools, be sure that those project descriptions make their way in there. You wouldn't want to budget funds and then not have something that explains the allowability of the project, because then we'd have to return the application. So just be sure that any funds that are added, there is project narrative that goes with it. The ESEA coordinator project waiver will be honored and maintained. So for folks that usually have an ESEA coordinator project, we've kept you to 2 titles with caps of 4%. We've waived that requirement this year, just given how chaotic it's been with receiving allocations late and then later. And so just be aware that we still look at it with the holy grail of federal spending, which is reasonable and necessary. So we're still going to be reviewing what you budget for those coordinator projects with that lens in mind. Again, I mentioned this. If you're used to transferring into Title I and that triggers you over 500,000, you may be used to also having a set aside for family engagement. And SAUs with non-publics, obviously, too, right? It's very important that if you take 2 and 4 and you transfer all of it or most of it, that your non-publics, for those that consult with it, are aware of that because their share is going to look smaller. And then that is also going to trigger Title I per pupil amounts to change, because you get low income student counts for proportional shares. So if you are a district that gets 50,000 in Title I, and now you transfer and you have 100,000, your per pupil shares for those low income students that attend the non-public actually increases. So we have a couple districts that are used to doing that, and that means they actually get a different amount, a little bit more usually in Title I equitable services. So email Jess Karen and let her know so we can make sure you've got the right Title I amount for your non-public. Is it still me?
Oop, nope.
Take it away.
Yeah, so now that folks have really the totality of ESEA funds that they were anticipating at the onset of this fiscal year, it'll be really important, as Rita indicated, to budget out all of the remaining funds that you have to your various projects and initiatives. So whenever it comes time for us to actually allocate out funds that have been awarded to us through the ESEA application, it's always a two-step process, right? The first of which is that you're going to allocate funds to your individual projects via the Create School and District Projects page. And then the second step is actually to go down into that individual project budget page and budget out those funds how you need them, right? Whether it's salaries, benefits, supplies, etc. This can look a little bit different depending on if you are, say, you have a targeted assistance or school-wide program. But at the end of the day, those funds need to make their way from the allocations to Create School and District Projects and down into the individual project. Similarly to a point Rita made earlier, as we're working to update projects, budgets, etc., it'll be very important to also ensure that you're updating your narratives to align with the funding that is now associated with each of those individual projects. So in the case of, Title II, Title IV, etc., if you're adding those funds to a particular project and not consolidating them, say, under school-wide authority, we would expect you to have some specific information as to how you intend to leverage those funds at the local level. Just to reiterate some information that's been shared with folks previously, depending on where your ESEA application for FY26 was at the time that we bulk loaded allocations the other day, there are some nuances as to what to expect for the next couple of action steps here. So if you were in a status of draft started or return for edits, essentially it means that your application is now all set for you to begin mapping out how you intend to leverage funding from Titles 2, 3, and or 4. If you were instead in a submitted status, so you had recently submitted, your superintendent signed off, etc., we as a team are currently in the process of reviewing those kind of final updates that were submitted before bulk loads went out. And if you haven't received feedback or your application back at this point in time, it's very likely that you will in the next couple of days, at which point in time you'll be able to, again, jump back in and look at adding in some of the ESEA funding that you've been awarded. And then for any folks who were somewhere in between, maybe their application was waiting for superintendent or business manager approval, and so they were kind of in that workflow limbo, so to speak. Those folks should have already received their applications back to them to make some adjustments here for these additional funds as a manual adjustment made by members of our team not too long ago. And then just a friendly reminder here, now is a really good time of year as folks are transitioning into and out of roles they may have held last year to double check and make sure that the folks that are supporting your ESEA work have the appropriate access level, permissions, etc. within the Grants for Me system. A good way to double check this is to take a look at your address book within the application, and that way you have kind of a one-stop shop to see who has what access. If somebody's left the district, it would allow you to see if they still have the permissions they would have had last year. If anybody needs to make any adjustments to any sort of user access, maybe you have a new building principal or your superintendent has changed, anything like that, you can do so if you're a user access administrator by going to the administer user access piece here, and then you can search for individual users by last name, email address, etc. And you can go about updating their roles at that point in time. I'm putting a link in the meeting chat right now to a resource we have on our website. It's our user access guide, which is basically a step-by-step document that will help you if you are in that user access administrator role to understand what steps you might need to take to update some users for your individual SAU. If at any point in time you have challenges or you need support with making those updates, feel free to reach out to your ESEA Regional Program Manager, and we can certainly help you through that process.
Great. Well, I know we're knee-deep in FY26, but FY27, Title I, Equitable Services, the data collection is this fall. If you all remember who work with private schools who received Title I, we shifted from to the data team helping analyze and go through this data just to increase the accuracy of those proportional shares to private schools. What that means is that they have that same October 1 deadline for submitting data. So we are having a required training for private schools who apply or don't apply, but put in data for Title I. So if they wish to receive, if any private school wishes to receive Title I services, then they must attend this reporting webinar or watch it. The webinar will be on September 2nd. I can drop a link in the chat to where you need to sign up. It's also on the professional development calendar on the MDOE website. And again, that deadline is October 1, 2025. So ESEA coordinators, please share that with your non-publics. You are also welcome to attend the training. I think it'll be informative to you. In the past, we worked more directly with the private schools, but since this data collection process, SAUs are a little more in the loop about how that collection process works. I think that training would be helpful for you as well. And then we also just recommend, as you all are aware, we switched from Synergy to Connect for the student reporting platform. So the general trainings on this new platform were in June, and the last one is tomorrow, August 13th. So non-publics are welcome. It's recommended they attend that just so they have a general awareness of what the platform looks like, as well as I know public schools have been attending them as well. But again, ESEA coordinators, please be sharing this information with the non-publics you work with.
Good morning, everyone. I am Tyra Corson. I'm the management analyst for the ESEA team, and I review and approve your ESEA invoicing. A few months ago, the Maine Department of Education received approval for an FY24 tidings amendment waiver, which has extended the due date to expire for FY24 funds to September 30th, 2026. Also, a waiver was received for the FY25 Title 1A funds that become carryover as of 10/1/25. That limits the Maine DOE to grant an excessive carryover waiver to once every 3 years. Excessive carryover is any amount above 15% of your Title I allocations after transfers. ESEA funds that are ending 9/30/25 are highlighted in yellow on your screen. Please submit your invoices for any remaining funds under these grants no later than 12/15. Spending down ESEA funds is a priority for the department. As you can see, we are have quite a bit available funding left in FY23 ESEA and Tier 3 school improvement FY24 that needs to be spent down. These funds must be obligated by 9/30/2025 and invoiced by 12/15/25. I want to thank those that made the time to attend the Federal Fiscal Boot Camp during the Educator Summit last week. It was a great opportunity to share and learn about federal grant management. The Federal Fiscal Team will meet again or hold office hours again on October 23rd at 10 a.m. Anyone who handles federal funds or federal programs is encouraged to attend these office hours. Please register to join us on October 23rd. Reimbursement requests. Here's a few reminders that the minimum backup required for any reimbursement request in Grants for Me is a detailed expenditure report. And these reports must be in a PDF form. They should not be an Excel spreadsheet. Additional backup for PD travel and tuition reimbursement is required as well. And those invoices should include the name of the staff participating in PD, dates of travel or attendance for school, and reimbursement for any of these expenses is always after the fact. Few reminders regarding FY26 ESEA funds. The allowable expenses must be reasonable, necessary, and allocable, incurred during the period of performance. As my colleagues have indicated this morning, they are encouraging folks to apply for pre-award costs and get their applications in by 9/1 due to the delay in funding. The period of allowability begins on the date of substantial approval, unless, of course, you have received pre-award cost approval. POs can establish an obligation, but not an expense. So an internal PO, this is especially important as you draw down your funds, does not even establish an obligation because it is an internal document. If it is a document that has been shared with a vendor, then it establishes an obligation, and we would need, for funds being drawn down, we would need a confirmation that the order has been placed. Contracts must not contain any dates prior to the substantial approval date. This is very important. Dates include, but are not limited to, the dates of service in the contract, the start date, the signature date, and the end date must all fall within the period of performance for the grant. Invoicing and Grants for Me. Do not start an invoice for a service period in the future. So in other words, if you're in Grants for Me and you've just submitted an invoice for July expenses, then you want to just put a service period for August in there, that is considered a date in the future. Grants for Me, when you go back to submit that invoice, will not allow you to do that. You must delete it and start again. If you have only received partial payment and are wondering why, this is more than likely due to the fact that in the application for grant for ESEA funding, you have transferred funds from another title. So in other words, transferring from Title I or Title II, transferring from Title II or IV into Title I, that would generate actually 3 different disbursements for that one Title I invoice. If you cannot invoice at all, chances are you still have a pending invoice that you have not received full payment for. All funding sources associated with a pending invoice must be paid out.
As always, we highlighted a few opportunities for some professional learning in regards to data collection and the non-public equitable services share. However, the department does have a professional development calendar where all of these links are available. You can filter by focus area, and that will give you an opportunity to register and get those on your calendar. Here's the contact information. And again, we encourage you to reach out to your regional program manager based on the region in which your SAU is located in. If you have a fiscal question, Tyra is your point of contact. Here is all the ways in which you can find all the departmental information and our social media platforms. And I know the team has been watching the chat room, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor up to you folks for any questions.
Is there going to be guidance about the Title II application? I heard you guys say that there are school and district projects, but